want to get into the Sonic franchise but you just don't know which game to play? Do you want to know which games are the best to avoid? My name is Lord Danny and welcome to the top 5 list of best and worst Sonic games for beginners. Before I get this list started, I need to tell you guys now that this is not a list based on which Sonic games are the best or which ones are the worst in general. They're not voted on by popular opinion. These are just my opinions from experience of what games in the Sonic franchise are the best to play and which ones aren't the best to play. So without further ado, let's start off with the worst Sonic games and the games that you need to avoid. Number 5. Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal.
What you think is exactly what this device will reveal.
Now the reason I put a Sonic Boom game on this list is not because of the terrible storylines or terrible glitches or the cheesy dialogue. In fact, those things can be quite funny in terms of Sonic games, and a lot of Sonic games do have those three things. However, I picked a Sonic Boom game simply because it doesn't introduce fans into the fandom. So if someone wants to become a Sonic fan, a Sonic Boom game is never quite a good place to start because they're quite new, and also Sega have announced saying that it's got nothing to do with the original storyline. I don't know if that's true, but it sounds to me like Sega are just basically saying Sonic Boom is its own separate thing. Therefore, if you want to get into the Sonic franchise, don't play Sonic Boom. The reason I picked Shattered Crystal over Rise of Lyric is because Rise of Lyric has a lot of stuff to offer. You can interact with the environment despite it being terrible. You can laugh at the cheesy dialogue and the glitches.
Oh god, no!
And you can sit back and watch cutscenes. In Shattered Crystal, you just can't do that. It's just a frustrating game with nothing to offer. Therefore, you must avoid it. Number 4. Sonic Chronicles The Dark Brotherhood. Sonic Chronicles The Dark Brotherhood is really a game to avoid if you want to get into the Sonic franchise. There are no other Sonic games like this one. This is because Sega tried to make an RPG game, much like Mass Effect or Final Fantasy. However, it just didn't work. It's very plain in terms of dialogue, the music is pretty bad, and overall, it's just not a fun game to play. It's quite slow, and Sonic is a game that's quite fast-paced most of the time. So you should really avoid this game if you're trying to get into the Sonic franchise. I'm not saying it's terrible, but I'm just saying you should save it for later on in your Sonic fandom because it's quite boring and there are no other Sonic games like it. So once you get used to the control scheme on that game, you may as well have got used to playing Final Fantasy. Number 3. Sonic Shuffle.
Well, one thing's for sure, we stumbled into a very strange place.
We all know that Sonic rivals with Mario in many ways, and Sega loves to prove this by making games that basically are just rival copies of Nintendo's games. For example, they had Sonic Drift, Sonic Art, and Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, all rivals to Mario Kart. However, they really shouldn't have tried to copy Mario Party. Sonic Shuffle is a prime example of when you try and rival a company and it just doesn't work out. Games like Sonic R, that was an early game. That was when Sonic was just transitioning from 2D to 3D. Sonic Shuffle, what happened? We had Sonic Adventure, so it was when Sega was at its prime moment with Sonic. However, Sonic Shuffle, it just went downhill. It tried to rival Mario Party, but the minigames were boring and the storyline was boring too. Sonic Shuffle was basically the opposite of what it was trying to be. It was trying to be a fun party game, but it just wasn't. So if you're a beginner Sonic fan, avoid this game at all costs. Number 2. Sonic and the Secret Rings.
Hey, wake up!
Sonic and the Secret Rings could have had a lot of potential. The story's not that bad, the characters are bearable, the music and level designs are actually quite nice, it's just the controls. The controls for the game are much like the Mario Kart Wii controls. You have to steer Sonic as if you're steering a car, but the problem is, Sonic isn't a car, so steering the remote as if you're driving a car is pretty poor. Also, flicking the remote to perform a homing attack doesn't quite work in this game. It's one of those things that probably could work, but somehow it just doesn't. When you flick the remote, you don't always hit the target you're aiming at, and a lot of the time you need to hit targets. The most frustrating thing about the controls in Sonic and the Secret Rings is the fact that you just can't turn around. Once you go past something, you cannot turn around and go back to get it. It's a really bad control system because a lot of the time in Sonic you do miss things because, as you know, the Sonic games are very fast paced. So running past something that you need to get is very, very common. But sadly in Sonic and the Secret Rings, once you go past something you can't turn around to get it because you're going in a straight line. Just a heads up, I have a friend who has Sonic and the Secret Rings and it's the only Sonic game she owns. And the reason she didn't play any other Sonic game was because she has this one, which is terrible and deterred her from the entire franchise. So, basically, Sonic and the Secret Rings, terrible for beginners. Number 1. Sonic Free Riders. The Sonic Riders games really aren't that great. Sonic Riders itself is pretty poor, and the controls are very, very annoying. However, at least the first 2 games were bearable. Sonic Free Riders, a whole new control scheme, which breaks your back. Now, I had a friend who owned Sonic Free Riders. He was so excited to have it, but then he told me that he basically became Neo from the Matrix when he had to bend backwards to turn a corner. The controls are really bad. The sad thing is, the game could be really good if it just wasn't one of those motion games, because Sega couldn't get the motion right. Though I don't recommend any of the Sonic Riders games, this is the game that I recommend you avoid the most, because you don't sit down with a controller and play it. Also, Sonic Riders and Sonic Riders Zero Gravity have similar controls, so at least you get 2 games with the same control scheme there. However, Sonic Free Riders has its own control, and there are no other games existing that have that awkward control scheme. So, don't buy it, and don't play it. Now that that's out of the way, it's time for me to recommend the 5 best games to play if you're a beginner Sonic fan. Number 5. Sonic 06.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
Now before you spam the dislike button, hear me out here. Sonic 06 is a next-gen game which is very, very disliked. 90% of fans hate this game because it's glitchy, it has plot holes. There are plenty of things to hate about it. However, 10% of Sega's fans actually don't mind this game, and I fall in that 10%. Now, the reason I recommend it for beginners is because if you are in the 90% of fans that will hate it, then this game will prepare you for the worst that Sega has to offer. However, if you're in the 10% that likes this game, then it's actually really fun. Sonic 06 has the best soundtrack out of all Sonic games I've ever played. Also, the voice acting's pretty good. I mean, Mephilus the Dark has got the most menacing voice, and we have Dan Green to thank for that. It's also worth pointing out that Sonic Riders came out the same year as Sonic 06, and the graphic difference is amazing. So when people say that Sonic 06 had bad graphics, just look at Sonic Riders because it came out in the exact same year. But like I said, if you're in the 90% of people who hate this game introduces you to Sega's worst and darkest moments. So, any game that Sega throws out, you'll be able to tolerate if you play Sonic 06. Number 4. Sonic Generations.
Surprise!
Sonic Generations is a short game, and it's not the easiest, but it's not the hardest either. It's quite good for beginners because it shows you all the different stages from Sonic's past. There are also a variety of characters you'll be able to beat in this game, who you have to rescue from these stages. Though this is really a game aimed at nostalgics and people who have been fans of Sonic for years, I still think it's really good for beginners because you'll be able to see exactly how Sonic has progressed. So, beginner Sonic fans, I recommend Sonic Generations for you to play. Number 3. Sonic Adventure 2.
He must be using the Chaos Emerald to warp.
Shadow. I'm the world's ultimate life form. There's no time for games. Farewell!
Sonic Adventure 2 had great gameplay and a great story. I recommend this game because the story is really compelling. This is the game where Shadow the Hedgehog makes his first appearance, and honestly, you'll never see him the same way again. Because before I played this game or saw his backstory, I just thought it was like a dark clone of Sonic, but then when you see his backstory, it makes you want to cry. And in this game in particular, his story is just so well done, and how it's revealed is brilliant. And the ending as well, it makes you want to cry. So I really recommend you get this game because the gameplay is great. You can play so many different characters, whether you want to be a dark character or a good character. So Sonic Adventure 2 is a game I recommend for beginner Sonic fans. Number 2. Sonic Mega Collection Plus. Sonic Mega Collection Plus has loads of different Sonic games on it. It was a game that my parents got for me when I was becoming a Sonic fan, and honestly, it introduces you to the best days of Sonic. If you weren't around in the Genesis days, but you have a PS2, just buy this game. You'll be able to play a load of different classic Sonic games, and honestly, they're all quite fun. Plus, it's a variety of games, so you'll have Sonic 1, Sonic 2 and Sonic 3, then you'll have Sonic 3D Blast. It's really fun. You'll also be able to see a lot of the Sonic comics on this game, and also you'll be able to watch some of the Sonic Heroes concepts, which is actually quite interesting despite Sonic Heroes now being an old game. So, while having a load of different games to choose from, you have comics, you have manuals, you have concept arts, and concept video cutscenes from Sonic Heroes. Now, if that's not interesting, I don't know what is. But if you don't have a PS2, then I recommend getting Sonic Ultimate Genesis Collection, because that is very similar, but it's for the PS3 instead of the PS2. But my ultimate recommendation is Sonic Mega Collection Plus. Number 1. Sonic Colors.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
Sonic Colors was a game that disappointed hardcore Sonic fans because it was really easy. However, if you're a beginner, it's the perfect game to play. Targets are locked on for you when performing a homing attack, and it warns you when you're going to fall down a large drop. So, it's actually really easy to follow. It may be disappointing for people who want a challenging Sonic game. However, because it's really easy and it introduces you to how modern Sonic games actually work, it's the perfect game for beginners who want an easy start. Just a heads up, Sonic Colors was the first next-gen game that I actually played, and it introduced me to the Sonic franchise really well, so I highly recommend you get this if you're a beginner. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my list, and I hope it helped you if you are a beginner Sonic fan. If you have any other recommendations for people who are trying to start out with Sonic, don't forget to leave them in the comment section below, and also give reasons to why you'd recommend those games. I'm Lord Danny, signing out.